In this video, we'll continue with adding and subtracting application strategies. Let's highlight our givens and our goals. So Brianna took the SAT exam twice. The first time, she earned 520 points on the math portion. The second time, she prepared for the exam and earned 680 points on the math portion. Now here comes our question, which is our goal. How many more points did she earn on her second try after studying? Okay. So let's think about the first thing we want to think about is the structure of this problem. Okay, so we want to think, did something happen where we added something on or took something away? Okay, and there is a change in these two quantities. Okay, but the points, the 520, weren't taken away from the 680. Okay, it's not a part whole. Okay, these aren't parts of some other whole. Okay. So it looks like it's a comparison problem. We're comparing her two different scores. Okay, so here's comparison problem. We have two amounts and a difference. And in this case, we're trying to find the difference. And notice when you're trying to find the difference, you subtract the two amounts, okay, and this gives you the difference. So let's go back to this problem. Okay, so we decided that it's a comparison problem, so we're going to write that down. And since she earned more points on the second attempt, we're going to say the second attempt score minus the first attempt score is going to equal the difference in the scores. So this one is straightforward. Since we pulled this from the chart, we know the second attempt score was 680, and we know the first attempt score was 520. Okay, and this will give us what we're looking for, how many more points she earned on her second try. Okay, so we don't have to rearrange anything here. Now let's solve this using place value. 680 minus 520. 0 minus 0 is 0. 8 tens minus 2 tens is 6 tens. And 600s minus 500 is 100. Okay, so we'll write our final answer as a complete sentence. Look back at our sentence so we phrase it correctly. She earned, who is she? Brianna earned 160 more points on her second try after studying. So notice I always refer back to that goal when we write this sentence so we could write it clearly after studying. Let's look at the last one. In 2017, now let me get my highlighter ready. There were 28 member countries in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, so that's NATO. All 28 of these countries are also members of the United Nations, which we call the UN. Now, if there are 193 members in the UN, okay, so that's given information. It's kind of tacked on to the beginning of the question, which is our goal. Okay. Then, how many countries in the UN are not members of NATO? Okay. So looking at this structure, okay, we didn't add more NATO countries or UN countries. Okay, we're not comparing NATO countries with UN countries. We're actually looking at UN members that are not members of NATO and UN members that are members of NATO. So we're thinking of this as a part whole problem. Okay, so part A plus part B equals whole. So what are the parts? Okay, so the whole is talking about the 193 member countries in the UN. So this is the UN, and it's broken into two parts. Okay, we want to find the part that are not members of NATO. So we'll just call this not NATO. And part B is countries that are NATO countries. Okay, so let's see which pieces we have here. Okay, well, we're trying to find how many countries in the UN are not members of NATO. So this part is unknown. So I'll put a question mark. The NATO countries are, all 28 of these countries are also members of the United Nations. So the 28 NATO countries are also part of the UN. So this is 28. And we are told there are 193 member countries in the UN. So this is 193. Okay. Now notice again, we set this up, okay, and we don't know what this number is, so we can't add 28 to it. So we're going to need to use this structure in a different form. Here's our part whole. If we're given the two parts, we can just add them together to find the whole. Okay, but if we're given the whole in one part, we want to subtract a part from the whole to find the other part. This is when there's two parts, so let's do this. So we're going to use whole minus part equals the other part. Okay, these are two different parts. They're not the same thing, so let me call them A and B. Okay, so we know our whole is 193. I actually called this part B, so I'm going to change this to B and A. Doesn't matter what we call them, but we should be consistent in the problem. We know that there are 28 NATO countries, so we're going to subtract 28, and this is going to give us our result, which is non-NATO countries. So now let's solve this using place value. So I'm going to set this up. Okay, I have 3 ones minus 8 ones. Okay, so 8 is larger than 3, so I'm going to borrow from one of these 10s. So I'm going to take a 10. 1 10 is 10 ones, so now I have 13 ones minus 8 ones is 5 ones. 8 10s minus 2 10s is 6 10s. And here there's an invisible 0. 1 minus 0 is 1. Okay, so our result is 165. Now let's write our answer as a complete sentence. We'll refer back to this statement. How many of the countries in the UN are not members of NATO? 165 countries in the UN are not members of NATO. Okay. So that was 4 different types of examples of addition and subtracting application strategies. And I hope you see there's lots of different ways that the information can be rearranged and stated. And the goal of these videos was to show you that you need to use the structure of the problem. You need to think about how the information is being given. Sometimes it's given in a way where it seems like the structure of it, a missing value, is actually not isolated in the expression. So you think, well, I have to add something, but it turns out you really have to subtract because of the way the structure is set up. Okay, so those are the strategies that will help you navigate. Basically, the big question students ask a lot is, how do I know when to add or subtract? Okay, so you don't have to memorize all these different types. You won't be tested on the different types. But it's good to be able to recognize them in general, because when you recognize them, you can see their structure, and then you can apply that to solve the problem.